Let me ask you something, and I want you to actually sit with it for a moment. Have you ever been with someone, truly been with someone, and felt that quiet, unexplainable sense that something between you two was not ordinary? Not just excitement, not just the rush or the butterflies, something deeper, something that felt like he wasn't only looking at you, he was actually seeing you. Like, for the first time in a long while, you felt genuinely understood by another person, and then your mind slowly starts to question it. Does he feel this too? Is this real for him the same way it feels real for me? Or am I overthinking this? Am I creating meaning where there is none? That soft but painful question is exactly what brings many people into this kind of reflection, and there is nothing wrong with you for asking it. In fact, it says something honest about you. It shows you don't treat connection lightly, you don't want something fake or half real. You want what is genuine, even if it's confusing. And in a world where so many people accept surface level attention and call it love, that kind of awareness is rare. So stay with me here, because what we're talking about is not just attraction, it's something much more subtle and sometimes much more confusing. And this is where things often get misunderstood. There is a big gap between someone being interested in you and someone being deeply emotionally moved by you. And most people mix these two things without even realizing it. You feel a strong moment with someone, a real connection, and your heart starts building meaning from it. But on the other side, the other person might still be operating on a completely different level of involvement. Maybe they enjoy you. Maybe they are drawn to you. Maybe they like how they feel around you. But that does not always mean they have reached that deeper emotional place you are feeling inside yourself. And when that difference shows up, it creates confusion. You start replaying conversations. You start analyzing silence. You wonder what changed, what went wrong, what you missed. But often, nothing went wrong in the way you think. It's just that two people were not standing in the same depth of feeling at the same time. And yes, that realization can hurt because it forces you to see that intensity in you does not always equal intensity in them. So here is something important to understand. A man who is only lightly interested will show patterns that come and go. He may talk when it suits him, disappear when it doesn't, and keep things in a space that never fully deepens. You feel him close one moment and far the next, and your mind tries to fill that gap with hope or meaning. But when someone is truly impacted at a deeper emotional level, their presence feels different. It becomes more consistent, more grounded, less confusing. You are not left constantly guessing where you stand. And stay with me on this, because this part matters. Confusion is often not a sign of deep connection. It is usually a sign of mixed levels of emotional investment. And when you start to see that clearly, you stop blaming yourself for not being enough. You start to understand that real connection doesn't keep you in constant doubt about its existence. It may still be complex, but it doesn't feel like you are always chasing clarity that never arrives. Sometimes it never arrives, not because you are lacking anything, but because that man, in that phase of his life, simply was not able to meet you at that level. A man who has truly been emotionally reached behaves in a different way, and the difference is not always obvious or loud. In fact, it is often hidden in the smallest details of his behavior. Think about a man who recalls something you mentioned weeks ago and brings it up naturally, as if it stayed with him without effort. Think about a man who looks at you from across the room, not in a showy or possessive way, but in a quiet, thoughtful way, like there is something about you he is still trying to understand. That is not simple attraction working there. That is something deeper, something that lingers. That is a man who has been affected by you in a way he cannot fully explain yet. And what makes this both powerful and slightly overwhelming is this truth: you cannot force it into existence. You cannot carefully design it or follow a formula that guarantees it. Emotional depth does not respond to scripts. What you asterisk can asterisk do, and this is where the real strength is show up as fully yourself as possible. No filtering, no pretending, no shrinking, because real connection does not respond to performance, it responds to authenticity. And when you are truly present in your own truth, the right kind of connection begins to recognize you. Not because you tried harder, but because you were real. And there is something softer, more painful hidden inside all of this. A lot of people start doubting themselves after being misunderstood or emotionally unmet. Maybe you gave your depth to someone who didn't know how to hold it. Maybe you opened up and it wasn't received with the care you expected. And slowly, without even realizing it, you started turning that experience inward. You began questioning yourself. Maybe I feel too much. Maybe I expect too much. Maybe I am asking for something that doesn't really exist. But listen closely here, because this is important. You are not too intense. You are not too emotional. What you experienced was not proof that your depth is wrong. It was simply a mismatch between what you offered and what that person was able to receive at that time. And that mismatch can feel like rejection, even when it is not about your value at all. It just feels personal because you were the one who showed up fully. And when someone cannot meet that, the silence they leave behind can be louder than words. Over time, that kind of experience teaches people to hide, to soften themselves, to hold back what they feel, to act like things matter less than they do. Not because they are dishonest, but because they are trying to protect what is left of their emotional safety. And that makes sense after disappointment. But here is what slowly happens when you keep doing that. You stop being fully seen, not because you are unworthy of it, but because you are no longer fully visible. Real connection cannot reach what is constantly being held back. At some point, the walls built for protection also become walls that block closeness. And this is the part many people don't want to hear, but it matters. The same guard that keeps pain out also keeps intimacy out. So the challenge is not to remove your boundaries, but to learn when and with whom you can lower them safely, even slightly, without losing yourself in the process. So how do you actually recognize when someone is emotionally meeting you in a real way? One of the clearest signs is in how they respond to your emotional truth. Not just your easy moments, not just when things are light and simple, but when things become real. When you are overwhelmed, when you are uncertain, when you are not at your best, pay attention to whether they lean in or step away. A man who has been genuinely affected by your presence does not treat your emotions as something inconvenient. He may not always know exactly what to say, but he does not disappear from you in those moments. He stays present, even if imperfectly. He tries, he listens. And even in silence, there is a kind of steadiness. That steadiness matters more than perfect words. And this is important to understand, because not every man has been taught to handle emotional depth in a healthy way. Many are raised to avoid it, to fix it quickly, or to shut it down. So when real emotional honesty appears in front of them, their response reveals a lot. Some will withdraw because it feels unfamiliar or overwhelming. Others will slowly adjust, not because they were forced, but because something in them recognizes the value of what is in front of them. They rise a little, they soften a little, they start showing up differently, and that shift, even if subtle, is meaningful. It is not about grand declarations, it is about consistency, it is about presence. It is about whether they remain emotionally reachable when things are no longer easy. And vulnerability, especially in men, is often misunderstood. People expect it to look dramatic, like deep confessions or emotional breakdowns, but most of the time it does not appear that way. It shows up in ordinary moments, in small honesty, in casual sharing of something personal that was never said before, in asking for your opinion on something important without overthinking it, in letting their guard drop for a moment without announcing it. That is what real emotional openness often looks like in everyday life. And if you are only waiting for big emotional displays, you might miss the quieter signs that are already there. So pay attention, not just to what is said loudly, but to what is shared naturally, without pressure. That is often where the truth lives. That is where the truth tends to live. And here is something else I want you to really think about. Not just hear quickly and move past. Let it settle for a moment. A man who has genuinely been affected by you will often show a kind of protectiveness, but not the controlling kind. And this difference is everything. There are men who try to control where you go, who you talk to, what you do, and they disguise it as care. But that is not love. That is insecurity dressed up as concern. Real protectiveness is completely different. It is quiet. It is observant. It is the kind where he notices a change in your mood before you even explain it. Where your silence says something to him without words, where he pays attention to your energy even when nothing is being said directly. And when someone is unkind to you, he feels it, not because his ego is hurt, but because something about you genuinely matters to him in a deeper way. It is not something forced or acted out. It is not a performance. It simply comes from a place where your well-being starts to feel connected to his emotional world in a natural way. And when that happens, you don't have to ask for care in the same way. It shows itself in how he reacts, how he responds, and how present he stays when it matters. Now pause for a second and turn this inward for a moment, because this part is not just about him, it is also about you. In conversations like this, it is very easy to focus so much on understanding someone else that you forget your own place in the story. So let me ask you something honestly. Do you actually know your worth? Not in theory, not in words you repeat on good days, but in those quiet moments when no one is watching. Do you believe you deserve a love that reaches deeper than surface attention? Do you believe you are worthy of being chosen not just for convenience, but for something real that moves someone on the inside? Because there is something important to understand here. The people who end up experiencing deeper connection are often not the ones trying the hardest to be chosen. They are the ones who already carry a quiet sense of value within themselves. Not loud confidence, not ego, but a grounded understanding that they are enough as they are. And that presence changes everything. It changes how they walk into a room. It changes how they speak. It changes what they tolerate and what they walk away from. And when a man encounters that kind of energy, something shifts in him. He doesn't feel like he is constantly being measured or tested. He doesn't feel like he has to perform just to be accepted. Instead, he feels like he is in front of someone real, someone who is not trying to prove anything. And that kind of grounded presence often draws something deeper out of him. It makes him want to show up better, not because he feels pressured, but because something in him recognizes value and responds to it. So if you are asking how to make someone feel that level of connection, the answer is not a technique or a strategy. It is not about saying the perfect thing or acting a certain way. It is about becoming more fully yourself, more honest, more steady, more alive in your own life. Because when your life is full in a real way, not dependent on someone else, that energy is what reaches people in a way that cannot be faked. Stay with this, because this part matters more than most people realize. And there is another layer here that often gets misunderstood. There is a big difference between a man who is truly in love and a man who is emotionally dependent. On the surface, both can look intense, both can feel overwhelming at first, but the feeling they create inside you is completely different. A man who is genuinely moved by you doesn't shrink your world or make you feel like everything revolves around him. Instead, he feels inspired by you. He wants to grow, not because you are demanding it, but because being around you makes him see more in himself. That kind of love has space in it. It has balance. It allows both people to breathe and still stay connected. But emotional dependence looks very different. It often comes fast, it feels consuming, and it can make you feel like you are the center of someone's entire emotional universe before anything real has actually been built. And while that can feel powerful in the beginning, it often comes with instability underneath. Real connection does not feel like panic or pressure. It does not feel like you are constantly trying to figure out where you stand. There is a steadiness beneath it, even if emotions are strong on the surface. It builds slowly. It deepens with time. It does not collapse the moment things get difficult. And if you have ever experienced something that felt extremely intense but left you confused or drained afterward, that is usually the difference showing itself. Intensity without depth burns fast and disappears just as quickly. But real emotional connection has weight. It has consistency. It makes you feel more like yourself, not less. It doesn't take your energy away. It adds to it over time. And I want to be very clear about something here, because this is where many people misunderstand this whole idea. The goal is not to become someone in order to make another person feel something specific. The goal is not to shape yourself into a version that triggers a reaction, because the moment you start turning connection into a strategy, you lose the very thing that makes it real. And ironically, that is the exact thing that was meant to create depth in the first place. What actually creates lasting emotional impact is authenticity. It is showing up without hiding the parts of yourself that are real. It is allowing yourself to be seen without turning every moment into a performance. And yes, that requires courage. Because being fully yourself means there is no mask to hide behind. But that is also where the strongest connections begin. Not in perfection, not in control, but in truth that does not pretend to be anything else. But the moment it turns into something planned, something calculated, you have already stepped away from what you are actually looking for. Because real connection does not respond to strategy. Strategy might create attention. It might even create curiosity for a while. Sometimes it can spark interest, yes, but it does not create the thing we are really talking about here. What we are talking about cannot be forced, staged, or carefully arranged. It only grows through real presence, through honest moments where you are not filtering yourself, not adjusting yourself, just being exactly as you are in that moment, and that cannot be copied. It cannot be rehearsed. It can only be lived. Which is why everything always circles back to the same truth. It comes back to you, to your awareness, to your healing, to the way you understand yourself when no one is watching, to your ability to sit with your own emotions without running from them. Because when you reach that place, something changes in how you move through life. You stop acting, you stop performing, you start simply existing in your own truth. Stay with this for a moment, because this is where everything begins to shift. And when you begin living from that place, when you start showing up as a woman who understands her own value, who feels her own emotional depth without fear, who does not hide from her sensitivity, who does not feel the need to apologize for what she genuinely wants, something subtle but powerful starts to happen. You become noticeable in a different way, not loud, not dramatic, but real. And realness has a weight to it. It leaves an impression. It stays in memory longer than anything artificial ever could. Because people may forget words, they may forget moments, but they rarely forget how someone made them feel when that person was completely authentic. And that is the kind of presence that reaches deeper than surface level attention. It is not about trying to be unforgettable. It is about being so honest in your expression that it naturally becomes something people remember. And stay with me here, because this part is important. The goal is never to impress. The goal is to be real enough that there is nothing left to fake. And this brings everything back to something simple, but not always easy to accept. Deep emotional connection is not discovered like an object you find. It is built over time. It grows between two people who are willing to be real with each other in small, unguarded moments that most people overlook. It grows in conversations that are not polished. It grows in the choice to stay present instead of shutting down when things feel uncomfortable. It grows when honesty is chosen over performance, even when it feels easier to hide. And most importantly, it grows from within you first. It starts with how you see yourself when no one is validating you. It starts with whether you believe you are already enough, not something waiting to be completed by someone else. Because when you stop waiting for someone to give you worth, and instead start living from the understanding that you already have it, the entire energy you carry changes. And that change is what shapes the kind of connections you attract. You do not need to earn a deep connection. You do not need to prove yourself into someone's emotional world. What you need is to become so aligned with who you truly are that anything real has no choice but to meet you at that level. You show up as that, you live as that, and then you allow life to respond. And here is something important to hold on to. You are not asking for too much when you want to be truly seen. You are not unrealistic for wanting something that feels real and meaningful. You are not too emotional, not too sensitive, not too deep. You are simply human. And your depth is not a flaw to be fixed. It is part of what makes you capable of experiencing something real in the first place. And somewhere, at the right time, with the right person, something will meet that depth without fear. Not loudly, not in a dramatic way, but quietly, in a way that feels steady and real. And when that happens, it does not just change the way you see love. It changes the way you see yourself. Slowly, gently, but permanently. That is the kind of connection that stays. That is the kind of connection worth growing into. Not because you need it to complete you, but because you already stand complete on your own. And from that place, something real finally has space to grow. And if this message reached something inside you today, if it made you pause for even a second, then hold on to that feeling. Let it stay with you. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, pass it on. Because sometimes the right words at the right time change more than we realize.